1929, Blue Skies.
In the 20s, yes.
Blue
28,
skies.
20, smiling at me.
Yeah. Nothing but blue skies do I see. Yes.
Never saw the sun shining so bright. Never saw things going so right.
They used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there, right on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream, with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread?
The stock market crash of 1929 was an economic catastrophe, triggering the Greatest Depression in American history. The crash brought the Roaring '20s to a dramatic end. At the height of the Great Depression in 1933, 24.9% of the nation's total workforce were unemployed. Wage income for workers who were lucky enough to have kept their jobs fell 42% between 1929 and 1930. This was an era of desperation that spared virtually no one. During this period, the movies offered a captivating mix of genres that resonated deeply with audiences that granted a temporary reprieve from daily struggles.
You're going out a youngster, but you've got to come back a star.
The fashionable Strasberger's jewelry shop in Ringstrasse was the scene this morning of the latest jewel robbery.
Oh, what did you do that for? Something kind of cute was about to happen.
The Bride of Frankenstein.
So while some films had storylines that existed in a world where there was no depression, there were other films that directly tackled the very real-life economic conditions and social effects that the Great Depression had on American society and culture. And in this video, I'm going to take a look at a few of those. Films that dramatize the darker side of American life during the Great Depression.
Yeah? Who says so?
Films that reflected the political, cultural, and social landscape of the time. The films in this video are confined to the years between 1930 and 1934, before the studios began self-censoring their content through the Motion Picture Production Code. But first, this video is brought to you by Aura. Lately, I've been dealing with an overwhelming amount of spam calls and emails, and it's been driving me crazy. And my email inbox is cluttered with messages from websites I've never even signed up for. To make matters worse, my family and I were victims of the recent AT&T data breach. Since then, my credit card information has been stolen twice in just 6 months. One of those thefts happened because of a card skimmer at a gas station. As a result, I had to go through the hassle of canceling my bank and credit cards not once, but twice. And if that wasn't enough, I then had to update all my auto-pay information for bills, services, and subscriptions each time. That's why I started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. After signing up, I was shocked to see how long the list of my leaked passwords and email information was. It even included sites I hadn't visited for years or had completely forgotten about. Aura helps me take control of my online security by alerting me when my personal information is being sold on the dark web or by data brokers. It also automatically removes my information from data broker websites and helps me take action if it's exposed on the dark web. In today's digital age, protecting our privacy is more important than ever. Aura provides me with the peace of mind I need knowing that they're always working to keep my personal information safe and secure. That's why I recommend heading over to aura.com/cinemacities to start your 2-week free trial. The link is also in the description below. Take control of your online security today with Aura.
Kansas City, Missouri. Here's a real philanthropist. Louis Cumnow, a clothing merchant, is giving away 500 overcoats from his stock to unemployed men of the city.
And people were walking around in the hallways of our building and in the streets with inquiring eyes and saying, has it happened to you? Has it happened to us? What is happening?
The Depression, Derek.
We're going to meet us to death today.
Oh, what a shame.
Yes, ma'am. My father ran away so we couldn't pay the rent.
Oh, come on, Mary.
with its many subplots revolving around what the New Yorker called sexual violence, relentless poverty, crude emotions, and stifled dreams. 1931's Street Scene, directed by King Vidor, is a good place to start. Adapted from the Pulitzer Prize-winning stage play by Elmer Rice, Street Scene is a gritty slice-of-life urban drama chronicling one long hot summer day and the lives of the inhabitants of this New York City tenement building. And most of the action is confined to the front stoop where residents chit-chat, argue, gossip, and scheme.
Shh, be careful, she's coming. Kiss me, kid.
I'll say. In Italy, where I'm born, is much more hot like here.
Many of the residents are dealing with job insecurity, financial stress, and the struggle to make ends meet.
Why are we going living in a place like this?
With tension between social classes, personal grievances, and prejudices on full display.
All the same, you people are the first to ask for help.
Will you listen to who's talking about Christ?
We don't want no foreigners coming in telling us how to run things.
Nothing wrong to be a foreigner. Many good people are foreigners.
It's a microcosm of wider political and social turmoil playing out across the country. Some of the language here is shocking, and there's no innuendo with situations. They are made explicit.
Hey, you seem to think I ought to hang out a flag every time some bozo decides to wipe off his mouth on me.
Director King Vidor, really one of the greats of American cinema, whose career spanned from silent to talking films, was a filmmaker whose work often depicted the everyday lives and struggles of ordinary people in authentic situations, facing pressing social issues. He was a practitioner of social realism, and in Street Scene, there's Mrs. Morant, trapped in a cold marriage, who seeks solace in the arms of another man, and her daughter Rose, who must fend off the advances and propositions of her married boss.
Let me go now.
Kiss me goodnight.
No.
Just one little kiss.
No.
Yes.
Then there's Mrs. Hildebrand, a single mother, abandoned by her husband facing eviction and dependent upon the charity of others.
Mrs. Hildebrand? To a moving picture show?
Yes, ma'am.
Where did you get the money?
It was only 75 cents.
75 cents is a lot when you're being dispossessed.
And Mr. Kaplan, the old communist, spouting party lines from his windowsill.
This is nothing but another device for pauperizing the working classes.
Oh, he's shooting off his face again.
Working classes. This can be accomplished only by a social revolution.
Yeah, well, we don't want no revolution in this country.
Mr. Kaplan vocalizes some very real critiques many had of the American economic system.
This meeting is called under the auspices of the American Workers' Party, an organization dedicated to the organizing of the working class of America and the overthrow of capitalism.
Oh, he's shooting off his face again.
And while these ideas did gain some traction, they were still relatively marginal within mainstream society.
And any dirty Bolshevik that says any difference will have to get his head busted open.
The argument is a reflection of a very real discussion happening as deteriorating economic conditions radicalized people to left-wing ideologies that offered a counter to the failures of capitalism.
We're going to be dispossessed today.
Oh, what a shame.
Yes, ma'am.
Street Scene is an overview, a sketch of people's lives, and it gives a more panoramic view of urban poverty and its impact on these characters.
I am a child of the Depression. I came of age at a time when there was no security and no opportunity.
Yeah?
A pretty girl, down on her luck, will get an advance of a dress so she can start. She makes a nickel for each 10-cent dance. When the comparatively decorous dance hall closes, there's a profitable sideline for the taxi dancer in the all-night clip joints just around the corner.
1932's Virtue zeroes in on the personal struggles and moral dilemmas faced by Carole Lombard's May, a prostitute who goes straight and marries a taxi driver named Jimmy, played by Pat O'Brien. There's no misinterpreting what May's profession is, because the film opens with her in court being sentenced for solicitation.
You and each of you is found guilty of soliciting. as defined in Section 887, Clause A, and I sentence you to confinement on Welfare Island for 3 months. Personally, I do not feel that a sentence of this kind will solve your problem or the city's. It has always been my opinion that women like you, if given an opportunity, can and will reform. I shall, therefore, suspend sentence, provided you leave New York within 24 hours.
Now, take my advice, sister, and keep out of New York.
Now May is a city girl and has no intention of going to Danbury.
Danbury.
That's where they make hats, ain't it?
Yeah, I'd have gone there, only I got a hat.
She gets off the train and into Pat O'Brien's taxi, and the two eventually strike up a friendship that leads to romance. May has gone straight. She's got a good job, she's ready to settle down, and when she finally does, the truth comes out.
What's she wanted for? Same thing she's doing now? Picking guys up off the street?
And well, after his initial shock, Jimmy is willing to forgive and forget May's past. At least that's what he tells her, but then he goes on to, live in a world of suspicion and distrust in his mind.
I don't know what you saw, but you're wrong. Won't you let me explain?
Well, I guess I got it coming to me. I got it coming to me for being the prize sap of the world. I was a sucker to think you'd change.
Another problem May has are her old friends. And because she has a good heart, May is the victim of a scam that leads to her being arrested for murder. In May, we get a sanitized, dramatized representation of the desperation felt by many women in the face of widespread poverty and unemployment. For some, this was their final recourse, the only way to survive. In 1932's Faithless, Tallulah Bankhead's Carol Morgan, whose trajectory is the opposite of May's, as she finds herself in a desperate situation, starving, facing eviction, and in need of medicine, she has no other option.
I always said you'd end in the gutter.
In an interview conducted by the Federal Writers Project, a young mother from Wilmington, North Carolina, recalled her descent into this dark world. I didn't want to, and I detested the thought of it, but I was going to do anything to save my baby. I didn't count any longer. My baby was all that mattered. I went from one town to another, and I stopped at only the best hotels in every town. The Review for Virtue and the Seminole producer recognized the truth at the center of the film. The Columbia picture of New York and two young New Yorkers possessed of neither fame nor fortune. Two young people who have only love is stirring realism. It contains actual situations of a girl willing to be good, but driven to desperate plights. May is a lucky character because she finds redemption through love. Safe in Hell's Gilda, well, she isn't so lucky. Directed by William Wellman, 1931's Safe in Hell is one of the most daring films of the era, and that's saying a lot when stacked up alongside films like Babyface.
Have you had any experience? Plenty.
And Red-Headed Woman.
You don't trust yourself. Oh, do it again. I like it. Do it again.
The film stars Dorothy McHale, and I'm just going to tell you right now that this is a performance that demands your full attention. She's fiery.
You've got a nerve. You're the one man I'm drawing the line at.
And pulls you right into the story of Gilda Carlson, a woman who'd rather die than break a promise. Gilda, once a respectable New Orleans girl, has turned to a life on the streets.
Oh, hello, Angie.
Listen, dearie. A friend of mine called up and he's lonesome, see? His wife is out of town and he wants somebody to go places with him.
But Gilda and this friend have history.
Now, there's no danger of the wife walking in this time. She's out of town.
And instead of showing him a good time, this encounter leads to even worse circumstances. And this is the moment Gilda's one true love, Carl, returns from sea, and she has to explain everything.
When I was working for them, one night he broke into my room and stayed there. He threatened me if I told his wife. She found out what he was doing and kicked me out. She followed me every place I got work and told him they bounced me, so I made my living the only way I could.
And after his initial shock, Carl is understanding and he forgives her, and then gets her out of town by smuggling her on his ship to a Caribbean island where there is no extradition agreement with the United States. To cement their very real and true love, Carl and Gilda symbolically get married, and Gilda swears her faithfulness to her husband, and she means it. Unfortunately, Carl has to leave on his ship with a promise to return, and Gilda spends the rest of the film fighting off the men, a collection of murderers and crooks. Gilda's experiences shed light on a heightened vulnerability of women in the era. She was unskilled. She would have been restricted already to the lowest paying jobs that were deemed women's work: waitressing, domestic work, shop girl. Bernice, a young woman who immigrated to the United States from Bermuda, told the Federal Writers Project interviewer, "My husband, who was a Pullman porter, ran off and left me with a $60 a month apartment on my hands and no job. I used to notice that Leroy rented a room from Bernice, would bring some of his friends home with him and they'd have a few drinks and he'd leave them alone in the room with Hazel." Hazel was a friend of Leroy's. "I wasn't quite sure that what I was thinking was, so until Hazel told me herself. It happened one day when an extra man came along and there was no one to take care of him. Hazel buzzed me and asked me if I wouldn't do it. I thought about it for a while, then made up my mind to do it. Well, that was the last day's domestic work for me. I figured that I was a fool to go out and break my back scrubbing floors, washing, ironing, and cooking when I could earn 3 days' pay or more in 15 minutes. Safe in Hell is not a pretty picture. There's also the added bonus of Nina Mae McKinney and Clarence Muse in important supporting roles. I mean, besides Carl, they're the only upright citizens that we see on this island, with the cast of shady, dangerous characters. And a film that begins in grimy desperation ends in tragedy.
If banks ain't safe for us people, why then allow 'em to run? Big iron vaults can't open themselves. Folks, something's gotta be done. Our hard-earned money's gone bye-bye, gone in that big bank crash. We're in a mess, folks, a terrible mess. Can't get credit and we ain't
And now, Charlie, will you tell us where you came from and how you got here and what your purpose was in coming?
Well, I came from Louisville, Kentucky, came on a freight train and for adventure.
For adventure? Most everybody that I know of that comes here is looking for a job.
Well, I'm different.
During the Great Depression, an estimated 250,000 teenagers became hobos, traveling across America by hopping on freight trains in search of work and a better life. The inability of families to take care of children led to an unprecedented number of kids leaving home to lessen the financial burden on their parents. Wild Boys of the Road is a story of two of those boys. Eddie, played by Frankie Darro, is a carefree kid who loves his friends, his old jalopy, and his family. He's living his 1930s teenage dream until the effects of the Depression hit his family.
Tonight, I finished up at the cement company. I've been laid off indefinitely. So for a while, we'll all have to economize.
His friend Tommy, played by Edwin Phillips, is already feeling it.
Past week, we've been getting our eats from the community chest.
Gee, I thought your mother got a job.
She worked 4 days in the last 5 months.
Eddie and Tommy decide to hit the road to look for work.
You know what we could do? I bet if we went to Chicago or New York, we could get jobs.
That's just what I feel like doing.
Would your father let you quit school and go?
Well, I wouldn't tell him. Why should I stick in school and have a good time when he has to stand on a bread line?
They encounter a gang of homeless child vagabonds crossing the country in search of work, stability, and a good meal. They also befriend Sally.
Where you going?
Chicago. That's where we're going, to get work. Where you from?
South.
The film vividly depicts the widespread unemployment, poverty, and desperation from a child's point of view. These are kids and teenagers navigating life alone on the road, hopping on and off overcrowded freight trains. Eddie and Tommy begin this journey with hope and optimism. They really believe they'll find work and be able to help their families make it through the tough times, but their journey exposes them to the harsh realities of life on the road, including crime, exploitation, and violence. And that hope is gradually replaced with disillusionment and the distrust and hatred of authority.
You better get away from that train and let us on, or somebody's gonna get hurt, see? Come on!
At the film's conclusion, our three young people are hauled into court for robbery, and Eddie gives a passionate speech about the suffering of young people and the indifference of the adults.
Go ahead, put me in a cell, lock me up. I'm sick of being hungry and cold. Sick of freight trains. Jail can't be any worse than the street.
You're reading the papers about giving people help. The banks get it. The soldiers get it. The breweries get it. They're always yelling about giving it to the farmers. What about us? We're kids.
And instead of them being hauled off to jail, Jack Warner, who insisted Wellman film an alternate, more upbeat ending, had the last word. So that's what we get. An upbeat, optimistic, there's hope in the future ending. Had Eddie and Tommy been sent to reform school, what may have awaited them may have been like something out of 1933's The Mayor of Hell, where the boys were abused and beaten, and one even dies in solitary confinement. In The Mayor of Hell, the boys have the final word, and as the credits roll, final justice, with no outside retribution for their actions. The Mayor of Hell is a prison drama, and the pre-code era saw a number of high-profile prison films hit the screens.
He knocked and he rang the doorbell. Come out of there, Frankie. Papa cried, I'm gonna blow you straight to. You ain't no good. No. 'Cause you're doing me wrong.
I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang, Hell's Highway, and The Big House portrayed the brutal realities of prison life and the inhumane conditions of chain gangs and work camps. These films dramatize the overlooked injustices within the prison system, reflecting broader societal concerns about institutional corruption and abuses of power. Released in the bloody aftermath of a year of deadly prison riots and the Ohio Penitentiary fire that occurred in April of 1930, where guards refused to release prisoners from their cells, causing 300 deaths. The Big House was one of the first films to dramatize the inhumane conditions under which some prisoners live. Inedible food.
Who did that? Me. What do you think of that? I want some food. I don't want any more of this swill. You give me some food.
Overcrowding, along with disproportionate and arbitrary punishment. Glenn Frank, president of the University of Wisconsin, noted, "The Big House vividly dramatized the national problem involved in the repeated uprisings of prisoners, the burning of prisons, and the murder of guards and inmates that had shamed America during the last 2 years." It's interesting to note that out of work and desperate World War I veterans facing mistreatment and brutalization under corrupt law enforcement are at the center of the stories of Hell's Highway and I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. After the stock market crash, many World War I veterans found themselves out of work, and about 17,000 of them traveled to Washington, D.C. and set up camp in May of 1932 to put pressure on Congress and President Herbert Hoover for early payment of their promised cash bonuses.
Makes me so damn mad a whole lot of people speak of you as tramps. By God, they didn't speak of you as tramps in 1917 and 18. No. This is the greatest demonstration of Americanism we've ever had. Pure Americanism.
The soldiers did not receive their bonus, and eventually the soldiers and their families were forcibly removed by the United States Army. Thank you for your service, I guess.
Well, why don't you start?
So all of these films have been rather downbeat. Since we started with King Vidor, we'll end with King Vidor and his 1934 film, Our Daily Bread. If Street Scene is Vidor's tragic urban opera, then Our Daily Bread is his soulful, uplifting pastoral. The film is a continuation of the story of John and Mary Sims, the main characters of Vidor's 1928 film, The Crowd. In The Crowd, John Sims, played by James Murray, is a regular guy with big dreams of success who moves with his new wife, played by Eleanor Boardman, to New York City. Once there, the two must deal with the trials and tribulations of work, marriage, and personal tragedies against the backdrop of what is portrayed as a very callous and indifferent big city. Our Daily Bread catches up with John and Mary, recast with actors Karen Morley and Tom Keene 6 years later, struggling to survive as bill collectors hound them and they barter all their belongings for food.
Could you give us a few more days? My husband's out in a wonderful prospect. I'm positive everything will be all right in 2 or 3 days.
There has to be a better way of life than the one they are currently living.
All I want is a chance to work.
You been reading the papers lately? You know, back to the land, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah?
Sounds like the only answer. You're on a piece of land I'll farm. Bank don't want it, neither do I. Gonna let it go. But it might mean something to you.
Once James realizes his shortcomings as a farmer, he also realizes that there are millions of people in the same situation he and Mary are in. So, in order to overcome his lack of knowledge about running and maintaining a farm, he starts a cooperative, working together to build a community.
On the Mayflower, there was a planter, a printer, a doctor, a soldier, a bookkeeper, and so on. And that's what we've got here. If they got along without landlords and grocery bills, so can we.
They fend off the bank seizure, they work the land, and together they all survive. In his autobiography, Vidor said, "I wanted to take my two protagonists out of the crowd and follow them through the struggles of a typical young American couple in this most difficult period." Across urban and rural America between 1930 and 1934, an estimated 4 million people lost their homes as a result of evictions. The Midwest and the Plain States suffered from the ravages of drought and dust, leading to a wave of internal migration as displaced families hit the road looking for better opportunities any place they could find them. John and Mary were lucky because they had somewhere to go.
You're coming into the country here, you're violating the vagrancy laws, you have no money, you've got a better chance of getting relief when you get down and out back in your home, where you belong.
And what they build gives people hope. It restores their sense of community. Here, everyone has value. And when drought threatens the farm, they all get to work. And in one of the most invigorating and uplifting scenes you'll ever see, they build a reservoir. And when the water begins to flow, it restores the crops and it restores their hope in the future. From The Working Girls to The Forgotten Men, this small selection of films from the Dirty 30s dramatized the turbulent conditions of the era, the poverty, the starvation, the injustice and instability, but they only hint at what life was like during the Great Depression. There's countless untold stories of heartbreak, tragedy, and triumph, stories of girls like May and Gilda, and boys like Tommy and Eddie.
You want to forget us? Well, you can't do it. Because I'm not the only one. There's thousands just like me.
There are 8 million stories in the cinema cities. This has been one.